think it takes about 7 or 8 seconds for this thing to kick through the pipes of the internet and get us out to a live stream on LinkedIn Live. And just for all of you that are in the audience, thank you for registering and thank you for coming in. We'd love to have a live audience participation. The chat is open, the Q&A is open. I'll get to you all in a second. But at the same time, we do live stream this out onto Twitter, and we do live stream this out onto LinkedIn Live for all of our followers around the world of Procurement Foundry and our Procurement Foundry members to be able to follow us as well. So as usual, Tina's in the control room somewhere in the ethos. Tina, are we live on LinkedIn right now?
Yes, just came up right now.
Love that. Okay, great. So I'm just going to refresh my LinkedIn Live so that I can get in there too and monitor the chat. Hello to everybody on LinkedIn Live. And hope you're doing well today from around the world. And let me just get my LinkedIn Live up and then we'll kick this bad boy off. And I'll give you a little bit of housekeeping as well. All right. Looks like the group on LinkedIn Live is heavily active today. If you're in LinkedIn, give me a shout out, say hello to everybody. Tell us where you're coming in from today on LinkedIn Live. I feel like a radio disc jockey when I say that. It's unbelievable. I have a face for radio. Okay. So a little bit of housekeeping. So as I said earlier, we've got a bunch of people in here already participating in the Zoom meeting. If you have questions to ask Oliver and Bob today, please feel free to put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A. I'll try to monitor the Q&A and the chat. Let's start really quickly in the chat room inside of LinkedIn Live. Everybody just shout out, tell me where you're coming in from today in the chat room, and everybody on LinkedIn Live. We will be monitoring LinkedIn Live. If you have questions for Oliver and Bob on LinkedIn Live, please post them into the chat on LinkedIn Live, and we will get those over into the Zoom meeting as well. Wow, South Coast of the UK, Denver, Colorado, India, Turkey. Wow, we're all over the world, gentlemen. So I'm really excited about that. All right. So without further ado, today's topic is all about sustainable procurement, driving impact through the supply chain. We're going to talk for about an hour about sustainability today with a couple of subject matter experts, Bob Young from SupplyShift and Oliver Hurrey from the Sustainability Pledge, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. Sorry about that. I want to get that right. And as always, I don't do introductions. I always screw those up. So why don't we let you two gentlemen introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about the companies that you work for. Oliver's got an exciting new startup as well, and a little bit about what you do and what your companies do. So if it's all right, Bob, I'll start with Oliver first.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, great to be with you all. And I recognise some names in the participants list. So hello to everyone that knows of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So, and I'll introduce it to those that don't. So, yeah, I'm Oliver Hurrey. I've been working in sustainability, mainly in sustainable supply chains for the last 15, 16 years. Spent all of that time trying to get people together, often with shared supply chains, to collaborate on the problems and issues in those supply chains. So I facilitate a number of different working groups, both temporary and permanent around the world, on sustainable procurement. And most recently, and most probably it's taken up a lot of my time in the last 2 years, has been launching the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So we'll talk about a little bit more of that in a minute. It's really about getting thousands of procurement professionals globally together to make it easier to embed sustainability and responsibility into the ways of working. So yeah, very much looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate that. And yeah, amazing work at the Sustainability Pledge, the Procurement Pledge, and also on your startup. I will try to send you over the virtual suit of armor from Startup World. And I don't think this is your first follow into it, but boy, there's a lot of cuts and bruises that come along with it. Bob, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about SupplyShift. Tell us about what your role is, and just a quick drop on what SupplyShift is for the folks out there.
Sure. Yeah, Bob Young. I am responsible for the commercial side of the business at SupplyShift. We help companies both get more transparency about their supply chain at all tiers, but also work with those suppliers to drive improvement in all areas related to sustainability. And yeah, my background is both technology and consulting, so kind of bring best practices on both sides of that and bring that together to help companies make progress with their suppliers.
Cool. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And by the way, just so everybody knows, SupplyShift is sponsoring this event today and is a sponsor of Procurement Foundry. So thank you for that. As you know, one of our rules at Procurement Foundry is we don't publicly endorse products and services, but we do thank our sponsors very, very much. So thank you for that, Bob. We really appreciate it. It's through sponsors like you guys that help us keep our community, our collaboration communities, and our events going. So we really appreciate that. All right, let's dive in. I am super excited about this because I don't get to talk about this topic too much, which is sustainability, because I'm not a supply chain guy, right? And we talked about this in the pre-read. I'm an indirect procurement guy by trade, by nature. If it doesn't fly in a plane or it doesn't sit in a PowerPoint presentation, I usually don't know what it is. And what I was shocked at was how much this leaks over. But let's start with just the fact that there's so many definitions associated with sustainability out there. It seems like every day and every LinkedIn post has a different definition, and different definitions from a geography perspective and industry perspective and maturity level of different organizations perspective. Certainly organizations like the ones I used to work for, which are intellectual property shops, have a completely different thought process on sustainability and risk associated with that than, say, a light industrial manufacturing firm. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I'll start with Oliver. Oliver, tell me a little bit about how you define and just wrap your arms around what sustainability is.
It's a great point. I mean, this is the problem with sustainability.
Yep.
It covers everything. The word sustainability, the word responsibility, the word risk, the word cost reductions, the word innovation, all of these things ultimately meld together. And the problem with sustainability is that it is enormous. You've got everything from human rights to scope 3 emissions to COVID in some cases, and then everything else included. So what on earth does sustainability mean? It's a massive issue. I think it's a particular issue in procurement world, because in procurement world, you have to try and be experts on a million different things anyway. So to add another term in that actually has a number of different facets to it, it just adds complexity. It almost makes it too scary, too big, too confusing to deal with in a busy procurement professional's life. So I think sustainability means whatever's material to your business. So, or any business would have done a materiality assessment, as they call it, which would have analyzed for their business, what is it that we really need to focus on in sustainability? So if you make trucks or cars, you're going to be concerned about electric vehicles and emissions and so on. You're going to be still concerned about human rights, but it's not going to be as a absolute objective and to lead on than it would be compared to emissions. So it really depends what's material to you. Then that boils down to what you do in your procurement function. If you buy logistics in procurement, or you buy cocoa and chocolate, then what you need to focus on, what sustainability means to your business and to you as a person, narrows down quite significantly. But in order to know how to narrow it down, you need to know what the issues, the risks, the things that can bite you on the backside or cause all sorts of issues and worries, or be opportunities for you in your role or in your business. You need to know what those things are. So boiling down sustainability to a couple of things that you need to focus on that are absolutely critical to you, because there'll be plenty of people worrying about the other stuff. That's a guarantee, is a critical part of this. But yeah, you've hit the one reasons why people sort of get scared by sustainability is the fact, the sheer size of it. Particularly if you've been someone who's been doing what you've been doing for a long time, and suddenly you're having a load of people saying you can't do it that way anymore. That can be frustrating as well.
Yeah, Bob, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on, I mean, from the client side? I mean, I know you get a lot of people on your doorstep talking about supplier risk management and sustainability. Interesting, because we have someone from the buy side of it and with the organization, but then we have somebody like Bob from the supplier side to kind of give us some insights on that too. I love panel discussions like this. I love doing webinars like this because I get the yin and the yang of the conversation, which is fantastic. So Bob, a little bit on how you and how your clients, you see the definition of sustainability.
Yeah, I agree with Ollie on the breadth of what it is. I mean, it's a whole host of environmental and social items that all roll under sustainability. I think that the thing that's probably most important to understand for this group is we see a big difference in structurally how organizations handle these things, because often what you'll see someone kind of related to an HR function that cares about labor in the supply chain. And you see someone in more of a, maybe a product side that's worried about greenhouse gas emissions or deforestation related to packaging. And so I think what companies sometimes struggle with is how do you take all of these different factors, bring them together, and then engage with your suppliers in more of a common way to make it efficient for your suppliers in terms of responding, instead of a bunch of different ways of providing data to a customer, but also in terms of working in partnership with suppliers to drive improvement across all of these areas. And that's really, I think, something that differentiates those who are just stumbling around sustainability and those who are really making progress.
Yeah, I'm going to go off script, and it only took me 12 minutes to do it. So what I think is really interesting about what both of you just said is the challenges associated with sustainability and how diverse it is. I know later on we're going to talk a little bit about best practices and how not to boil the ocean. Bob, you're leading right into my next question, which is all about where this resides and who it usually starts with. I'm going to stay on script for a minute. I'm going to stay on script. Let me do this before we keep moving on, though. I'm really interested in the audience, because we got a pretty big audience now inside of our Zoom room, as well as up on LinkedIn as well. Here's a question for you. I just want you to reply in the replies. In your own opinion, where do you see your maturity level around your sustainability program inside of your organizations? 0, let's do this. 1 is, I don't even know how to, my company doesn't even know how to spell the word sustainability. And 5 is, we're Yoda, we get this locked down. We got all the programs, checks and balances. We've been doing this for, 30 years, and we've got all the proper stamps on our products and things like that, right? So thank you. I will come back to that. I'm going to take a look. Thank you for everybody who's dropping their numbers in. Wow, 4.7. Oh my God, you're a miracle worker. Okay. So I know where I wanted to go with this, and I'm going to go back off script for a second. Sustainability to me seems like it's part of the overarching corporate social responsibility programs of large enterprises, just like supplier diversity and inclusion probably is as well. Do you see supplier diversity and inclusion and sustainability of supply chain all kind of matriculating up into the corporate social responsibility programs of large and all enterprises around the world? Oliver, how about that?
Yeah, I mean, so personally, I don't think it matters whether it's diversity or it's emissions or it's pandas or whatever it is. I think this is ultimately about risk, cost, innovation, license to operate, security of supply. These are the things that actually, I think, for procurement professionals and so on, resonate and are what are really at the heart of what they're trying to do. I think translating sustainability and all of the buzzwords that you hear around scope 3 emissions and whatever it may be, translating that into risk, security of supply, resilience, all of these, that's what we're actually talking about. And supplier diversity is really about innovation. It's about mirroring what your customers want. It's about ultimately being a good business. It's about all of these things that ultimately, especially customers and the consumers of the future they expect. It's just a given. It's like safety, and this is a cliche that's mentioned many times. So I think it has to be all lumped together. But the danger, and what's historically happened, Mike, is that this all gets put into the CSR department, which is just some small department on the corner of the office who are all a bit strange, and everyone looks at them and ignores them. That's the past. That's the past. Best practice now is there isn't a CSR department. There is a CSR person in every function and department. That is the future. So I think it is all kind of tied together. But for procurement, it's about translating into what does that mean for procurement people, I guess.
All right. I apologize, back on script, but thank you for that. I appreciate your insights in that. So I want to know where corporate supply chain sustainability currently resides in today's world. Is it part of the supply chain organization? Is it part of the procurement organization? Like Bob said, you got somebody from manufacturing and packaging. Like, is it not organized enough yet, and there's still sub players in the individual departments and stakeholders? where does it reside today, in your opinion, Oliver? And by the way, thank you to everybody who put numbers in there. It looks like we're at about a 2.5 to a 2.75 if I had to round out those numbers. I mean, we got some folks that are, walking on water, and then some people who don't know how to spell. So thanks for that. But where does this typically reside right now, Oliver?
Well, I'm sure Bob can reflect on this as well, because I know that the demands for the solutions of the data that you're seeing, Bob, comes from all sorts of parts of the business, and actually being able to translate that data into meaningful insight for different parts of the business. You highlighted product development, whoever it may be, human resources or procurement or whoever, is absolutely critical. I think, as I reflected, I think best practice now is that sustainability, whatever you want to call it, is embedded in all functions. So that is best practice. I think the leading businesses who really cracking supply chain resilience, risk management, etc., have CPOs and CSOs, so Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Procurement Officers. Tony Milliken at AB InBev is an example. Barry Parkin at Mars is another example, where basically it's the same thing. They are seen as the same thing. A good procurement CPO is a custodian of the sustainability in a small s as well as a big S of that supply chain. So I think it's integrated, and that's how it should be anyway. And we're getting there, I think. Yeah.
And certainly we're going to talk a little bit about some of the best practices and some of the places where people are succeeding in this, and skip forward a little bit. But as of today, it's still maturing, right, Bob? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I'll build on what Ollie said. I mean, think about the journey here. Years ago, the first place an organization felt pressure on sustainability was for their own operations, right? It was for their own employees and their own factories. That's why you set up, and so not to demean the function of CSR. That's why CSR was created, is to take care of your own function. Right. Then what happened was people said, well, not only should you as a corporate entity be responsible for your own greenhouse gas emissions and labor practices, et cetera, but you have the ultimate leverage on your suppliers. So you should be accountable for what happens in your supply chain. And so your sustainability team started to kind of pick that up and say, okay, how do I do that? But ultimately, the lever is, do you buy from them or do you not do business with them? And that's driven by the procurement organization. And so you see in the journey that companies are doing is you still have some sustainability departments that are trying to do it, but are kind of once removed from that supply chain and therefore can't do it most effectively. Those companies that are doing it well have shifted this to the procurement organization, because they're the ones who can make a difference with the suppliers. And frankly, most of the impact, I think the statistic that I've seen relative to greenhouse gases in particular is that over 80% of carbon footprint of a company, of a brand, is in their supply chain. It's not in their own operations. And so, if you want to make a commitment to lessen, your carbon footprint, the best way to do that is scope 3. It's go look at your supply chain and make a difference there. So those companies doing it well now have taken what was separately a sustainability department and put it into the procurement organization. And frankly, I'm seeing that happen not only with companies and brands who have products, but I've seen it in like major consulting organizations who had a sustainability practice and said, no, we're going to put sustainability in every single function when we go consult with a company. So, that's shifting, and that momentum has really started in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into that. I want to talk a little bit more about where this started, which I think was in supply chain and light industrial manufacturing. Now is moving into indirect procurement, and we'll get there in a minute. I want to go back. So I just want to ask a broad: why is this on everybody's mind? Like, what? I mean, I know it's been in manufacturing, but why now? What are the pressures? What are the touch points that are making sustainability like we've been doing this a long time, right? All of a sudden now on LinkedIn, the Sustainability Procurement Pledge comes out. We're seeing sustainability conferences, right? We're seeing lots and lots of discussion about this. lots of content on the media outlets that are out there. In your mind, Oliver, why is this on everybody's mind? Is it customer pressures because of consumer packaged goods, and now the next generation is coming up? Is it governmental political pressures? Is it investor relations, because now more companies we're worried about what the investor thinks of our sustainability? What's driving? Why now? Why?
It's the perfect storm. It's
Yep.
a perfect storm. So if you look at the top startups in the world right now, I was reading the Wired magazine's top 100 startups, huge chunk of sustainability people in there. If you're looking at, what's happening in the world from a, political point of view, we've got, leaders obviously leading on this. It is a perfect storm. So you've got a scenario where I think the sustainability pressures and concerns, if you are worried about climate change, if you're worried about human rights, you're worried about these issues, that has now got sharper and more prevalent than ever before. But on the other end of the scale, I think investors are looking for, and procurement professionals looking for new levers to be able to drive out costs, to manage our risk, all of these things. It's another string to their bow. So whether you romanticize and care about sustainability deeply, or you're wanting to extract or share more value for your business, the answer is often sustainability, because that's where everything's pointing to. I think another perfect storm in procurement is we've reached a point where procurement professionals have had enough of not being respected enough for the work that they do, for not the company not realizing the value that they add, the skills that they have. So procurement as a profession, I think, has got to a point where it's saying, we want to add more value to our business. We want to help with more strategic goals. We want to use our skills, our brilliant skills of negotiation, of creativity, and of innovation to add more value to the business. And what's happening is businesses are now making huge claims, big goals, CEOs standing up. And procurement now can actually help with those goals more than just cost or quality or whatever. So I think there's a bit of a perfect storm of the procurement profession realizing that they can create more value and be more valuable to their business. Of course, everyone's reaching an age where their kids are now pestering them, and you're reading everything and seeing everything on telly. You're having that kind of midlife crisis that you need to do something. There's a bit of that, of course there is. But look at what's happening in the world. I mean, the weather in the States, the weather everywhere. Lots of things need to actually be improved, and I think it's a bit of a perfect storm. Governments, investors, everyone is asking for this. So I think, having been in sustainability for 15, 16 years, I can guarantee you the last 2 years, more's happened, more has exploded on this than in the last 20. It's just been extraordinary, and it is a perfect.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Being in the industry for 20 years, I don't think I ever even saw this on anybody's radar in indirect procurement. And now there's subsections of conferences that are coming up around sustainability, even in indirect procurement, right?
Yeah, well, indirect's an interesting one. I want to pick up on that in a bit.
Yeah.
There's been an explosion in indirect procurement very recently, which has really surprised me actually as well.
So, Bob, anything from your side of the table? Are you seeing any particular big driving point that's like, oh my God, all of a sudden it's just shareholder, like we got to do this because our shareholders are jumping out of our stock, something like that?
I'm going to agree that there's a perfect storm, and I see comments about gut regulatory stuff, which is all great. I think there's one thing that is the catalyst, and that is companies have found, and investors have found, it's good for business. Once the data came in that said companies that pay attention to sustainability perform better financially, investors got religion, which made CEOs get religion, which means now the company's motivated. I worked with one retailer where, they were kind of dinking around with some stuff. And then as soon as executive bonuses got tied to, in their particular case, it was around plastics. All of a sudden the contracts got signed, the projects got started, and everyone wanted to know what the data was. And so I think it goes back to that one thing, that everyone now that the data's in, it's good for business, and now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. So
it's shocking when you start to tie things to people's bonuses, how quickly they pay attention to it.
It's human nature, and to be honest, the planet doesn't care if someone's doing it to get a bigger bonus or because they really care about saving the planet. It doesn't really matter. I mean, ultimately, we're looking. You have to engage a stakeholder. You have to understand what drives them. And there will be people who are focused on their career and their bonuses. There'll be other people who care more broadly about the plan. Doesn't matter. As long as we get you all focused on driving something that is frankly common sense, that's what we're dealing with here. It doesn't really matter why you're doing it. I think we're all past that now.
Yeah, that's brilliant insight, and thanks, Bob, for sharing the position on SupplyShift. I really appreciate that. All right, so let's talk about what people need to focus on, right? And in the pre-read, Oliver, you talked a little bit about gaps that are causing this not to get a foothold, or why it's taken to this point so far, right? You talked about 4 gaps that you felt were prevalent inside of current operations, whether they're supply chain or procurement organizations as a whole, and why that's a hindrance to them. Can you tell us a little bit about your 4 gaps and what you think are kind of the pushback against getting these things off the ground?
Yeah, sure. So about 2 years ago, 2 CPOs, a CPO Bayer and Henkel, 2 big chemicals consumer businesses, probably had too many glasses of wine, and we're seeing climate strikes and so on.
Is there such a thing?
Oh, definitely. But they felt procurement needed to do more, and they absolutely felt that was critical. So they created the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, now a global non-profit that I chair, and it was all about trying to make it easy for procurement professionals to embed sustainability and responsibility. So the pledge itself is a fairly simple thing. You as a procurement professional say, right, I'm committing to sharing more value with and creating more value for my business, protecting people, planet, whatever it is. The pledge has got different aspects to it, but you commit to that pledge. But the key is, how do you actually go from saying, I want to do something as a procurement professional, either personally, professionally, or both, to actually doing something? So what is stopping you just getting on and doing it? And so we got about 5,000 procurement professionals now that have signed up to this pledge and are working together to drive this forward. And they talk about 4 key gaps that stop them achieving the pledge. I don't know what to do. And so that sustainability is too big. It's too confusing. I don't know what best practice looks like. Where do I go for this information? The world is just a massive information. Everyone's talking about stuff. I'm too busy. How do I navigate it all? So I don't know what to do. That includes, I would say, actually getting data from your supply chain and actually really understanding what your supply chain's doing or not doing. I think that's critical. So you don't know what to do. The second thing is, even if you knew what to focus on and what issues to focus on, you don't know how to do it. You haven't got all this, you haven't got the experience and the skills and the knowledge and the tools to handle. Well, what tools are there? There's a million different tools. There's so many different software platforms and so on that all sort of talk about claiming to be able to do this and that, and very few cut through. And I have to say, the SupplyShift guys do a great job at this. But it is confusing to know what tools to use. So if you know what to do and you know how to do it, you often then don't have either the confidence to do it because you've never really understood what peers are doing or what collaborative groups there are, or ways in which you could actually join forces with some of your peers to actually make some of these actions happen, because a lot of the challenges in supply chains cannot be solved by you alone. It's impossible. You need to collaborate on those issues. So how do I network with my peers? How do I collaborate? So that's really the support gap, as I tend to call it. So you know what to do, you know how to do it, you found other people that share the same problem and you need to work together with them. But then the fourth one I would say is your boss won't let you. So you lack leadership, empowerment and capability. So I think that's a critical one. If procurement professionals can easily find what they need to focus on, they can easily find the tools to tackle it, like SupplyShift and others. You can easily find out how to collaborate with the peers that perhaps you didn't realize you needed to collaborate with, some more of the unusual peers or cross collaboration, different functions. And finally, if you can convince your boss of the business case, really simply, of why you should be allowed to go off and drive more sustainable, more responsible supply chains, which in this day and age should be too difficult, but apparently it still is. You're closing those 4 gaps, you're going to get a better chance of adding more value to your business and making it more sustainable. So that's what we talk about in the pledge. That's what we try to help procurement professionals close those 4 gaps.
Yeah, great stuff. It's really interesting and insightful to when you lay it out like that, just to say, hey, listen, these are probably everybody's challenges, right? And there's places where you can go to get help against these challenges. And from what I'm hearing and what you both are outlining, your sustainability program is not going to be the same as anyone else's sustainability program, because your culture and your company and your widgets and whatever it is that you do, your blend of supply versus indirect and direct, and you could be a consulting firm versus a light industrial manufacturing firm. Your program is going to be your own program, and it's not going to be, each one is individual and unique like snowflakes. However, that said, there are things that are holding you back and places now where you can go, and organizations that you can go to try and help you get a jump start on these things. And if you're aware of those roadblocks, then once you're aware of them, it's easier to get around them, right?
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, Bob and SupplyShift get this better than actually many that I've met on this when it comes to platforms, is that every business does have different ways of doing things and different questions they need to talk to their suppliers, different ways of different information they need from their supply chain, because every business and brand is slightly different. But at the core of it, you need to be asking, particularly suppliers that you share with your customers, with your peers, you need to be asking them the same questions in the same way. Otherwise, suppliers basically get bombarded with a million different questions and strategies from different people saying different things, when the core of it is basically the same thing. Yeah. So there's too many platforms out there that engage suppliers with a sort of one size fits all. Hey, you know, this is the way to do it, and so on. And I think particularly the more mature brands, the leading brands, want to be able to engage suppliers with a bit of customization, if you like, of that engagement. And so I think it's critical that we see tools and platforms get that balance between best practice or ways of doing things with the ability to add your own sort of sustainability flourish as a brand and as an organization around it to your suppliers. I'm setting you up here, Bob, I appreciate it, but I just still think you guys, that's the only you're one of the only ones who actually gets that. I think a lot of others preach it's our way or the highway. So
so Bob, comments and thoughts on that, and also I'm interested to know your thoughts on the folks that are knocking on your door. Where are they with it? I mean, are they just showing up like lost dogs, or are they're like, oh my God, I know I got to do something, but I don't know what I need to do. Please help me. You know what I mean? Like, what's the level of design and thought, I guess, as well. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on what Oliver said, as well as like what you're seeing just show up on your front door.
Yeah, let me give you kind of the supplier perspective on what Ollie said there. I mean, the good news, you know, with the momentum around sustainability is that the suppliers now are being bombarded from all of their customers. Right. Tell me about what you're doing here. Tell me about what you're doing there. That's the good news. The bad news is it's all another spreadsheet, or it's all, you know, some other platform. And the burden that's placed on the suppliers from all of this attention that sustainability is getting is hard. It's hard for them. And, you know, often they don't see any benefit to themselves, right? I'm doing this for you. And some platforms, some solutions expect the suppliers to pay to report to their customers, which is, you know, that's a stretch. So, you know, I think of groups, to kind of back to Ollie's comment about the way to scale this is to find commonality with your peers and then make it really seamless for your suppliers to provide common data to all their customers, and then unique data, which is going to be hopefully a smaller subset of that, to specific customers. And I thought about the Sustainability Consortium as one example. They're a consortium of retailers, mostly in the US, but also in Europe. And they've agreed on a standard set of questions about each of the products that they acquire from their suppliers. And what the suppliers can do is answer that question once and then say, hey, all of you retailers, here's the answer to that question. Now, that doesn't mean that those retailers don't also have maybe some other questions they want to ask those suppliers. And, you know, one of the things about our platform is it's set up as a network. So the supplier can, question by question, they can answer it once and share with a lot of different customers. And so, again, you know, obviously a lot of momentum here, but the only way that it can scale is to have that efficiency built into the way that these companies work together. So I'll transition now to your second question, which is, you know, where we see companies. I'll tell you, I think, you know, there's a journey here, and you're going to see, as you saw in your initial question at the beginning, right? People are at the beginning and people feel like they're pretty far down the path. I think most companies know what they want to accomplish, right? So they've kind of gotten out there and said, I know what the goal is. Sometimes it's because their CEO said it off the cuff at some conference, made a commitment for them, and now that becomes the target.
And somebody wrote it down, right?
Exactly. So, sometimes it's planned, sometimes it just happens. But I think most companies kind of know where they want to get to. But unfortunately, too many companies are still doing their own thing, right? They're not working with folks like the Sustainability Consortium or some of these other organizations that are making things efficient. They're using, they haven't invested in technology to make it more efficient. They're still doing Excel, and it's just putting a burden on their team, the Sustainable SupplyShift team or supply chain team. And so I think that's really where there's a great opportunity the next year or so to make a difference here as organizations find commonality that they can leverage and then find technology to be efficient in how they interact and engage with their suppliers.
Hey, shockingly, we're through 35 to almost 38 minutes so far already. It feels like we just started. So just want to let everybody know, if you have questions, feel free to put them in. Jared from the internet's got a great question around gamification associated with getting your suppliers to engage. I think I want to hold that until we get to the end where we're talking about some best practices and where we're seeing winnings, because I think Bob's probably got some insights into that. I want to talk about how to incentivize your vendors to hit the targets that you're hoping collectively as a whole, as a unit, you can all hit. So I'll hold off on that for 1 second, but I want you to start thinking about that question, Bob, because I'm really interested in that. I believe gamification works in a lot of different ways. I'm going to go back off script for a second. I'm really interested in what Bob had to say about some core data, right, from a vendor population, whether that's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 data, and the emergence of blockchain. I'm interested to know if you gentlemen think that there might be a place where you could publish your core data to the blockchain so that it's not irrefutable, it's not hackable, it's irrefutable, and it's open. It's essentially open source where anybody can go and look at your content associated with open and pull down, okay, listen, I'm about to do business with this vendor in Thailand. Okay, here's their sustainability data on the blockchain. It can't be hacked. So I know that it's, true. And then I just got to fill in the basics. I get 80% of the way there, right? Bob, any thoughts on that? Is there something happening in that space?
Well, I think gamification is gonna, or excuse me, I was thinking multitasking on your gamification question. I think blockchain is going to have a role to play here. I think what you're seeing today is blockchain helps you with transparency, right? So that's one of the two things. I can't assess someone I don't know is in my supply chain. So blockchain can add some value to see who touched the different components of my product along the supply chain. The gap right now with blockchain is that while you may know who they are, you don't know what their business practices are. And that's why there needs to be another kind of, step in that process to say, now let's assess their business practices and let's validate that data to ensure that it truly is accurate and consistent with the metrics that we're trying to capture.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver, you talked a little bit again in the pre-chat around how I think one of the major consumer packaged goods companies, I don't want to throw out their name, but if you want to, great, go for it, has basically drawn the line in the sand around a livable wage on the planet, right? For all of their vendors. It would be really interesting if somehow that vendor population could populate that in aggregate up to the blockchain, so that not only that particular consumer packaged goods company, but everybody else could adopt that standard as well, all in one fell swoop, right? Boom, easy. Here's 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 vendors. Here's their aggregate annual fee divided by their, confirmed labor counts, and off to the races you go.
No, it's interesting. Blockchain's been mentioned many times over the last however many years I've been doing this. I'm not sure anyone really understands practically what it can do yet. I think it's all very confusing, and it's a bit like AI. People claim something's blockchain, claim something's AI when it isn't. I think it's a buzzword sometimes. So I think we're slowly starting to get to the actual reality of what blockchain
can and what it can't do.
And I agree with Bob. I think it absolutely has its role in that thing. I think I was judging the ProcureTech 100 in the last couple of weeks, which was looking at the best 100 procurement technologies at the time. And the section I was judging was around supplier management. And there was some blockchain technologies in there, but they were very, very, very specifically looking at mining, for example, and electric vehicle batteries. And I think there are some instances where blockchain can be applied to certain instances and certain issues where you really need to know who's involved and what's been happening. But as you said, it's only one part of the puzzle, and you need to be able to get more insight into what those people are actually doing, not just who they are. On the living wage thing, so it's Unilever. Unilever, I've been working with their CPO, Dave Ingram, to really champion this story. So this is an extraordinary situation for a procurement professional where they are basically committing to asking their suppliers to pay a living wage, so to increase their costs in the supply chain in order to do business with Unilever. And they have absolutely no idea how they're going to do this. They've openly expressed that, but they're going to do it. Yeah. And they've basically got no real concept of how they're actually going to manage this situation and where cost is going to be obviously increasing in their supply chain. But they're committing to do it. And that's because their share price at Unilever has shown that the more commitment they make to sustainability, the better they do. But also because it's the right thing to do, to have a living wage around the world. But this is where it's interesting, talking to Dave and his team at Unilever, when you start picking into the business case of why they're going to ask their suppliers to pay a living wage, you start to realize that if they get their suppliers to pay a living wage, you're getting an entire population of the planet who's suddenly going to be able to buy more Dove soap and more personal care items from Unilever. Right. So there is a clear business case for asking their supply chain to commit to a living wage, where on the surface of it, you're thinking, they're crazy. They don't know how to do it. It's never going to work. But that's another example where there's no point Unilever on its own committing to a living wage. They need all of their competitors, all of their peers to commit to a living wage in order to get that population, even bigger, to buy more beer, more soap, more whatever it is, more Coca-Cola. Yeah. So the realities are that this is a great example of an initiative that feels a bit fluffy, is baked hard in commercial reason, and requires calibration to achieve it. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I think the problem there is the susceptibility to just one person stepping out of line, right? If you take that example, right, Bob, and you say, okay, we've got a major consumer packaged goods company that's going to drive some type of sustainability, and it's going to be around a human rights issue, right, or a labor issue, right, like livable wage. And you've got 10 or 15 of the largest retailers in the world that all agree that or consumer packaged goods companies that are going to agree to that. And then one of them steps out of line, and all of a sudden they can create a bar of soap for 30% less because they're not on that front, and it all quickly falls apart, right? I mean that's how. Well, but then the real question is if you can prove the transparency associated with that, does the consumer market then swing it the other way and say, hey, listen, you stepped out of line. You're all about just increasing profits. You're not about improving, the value, the livable wage across the world. Does it create the reverse effect of what they wanted, which was more margin, but then they lose unit sales? So it's a really, really interesting dynamic there of at some point you're either with us or against us, and you'll be judged on that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're either on the wrong or right side of history. There's an element of that, and if you're Kodak and you don't decide to invest in, digital cameras, then, this is where we are with sustainability. I mean, I think a lot of people think that, the realities are that if you're, an older guy, usually you're like, sustainability. It's not, consumers don't care about that. The most of the consumer, and we're dealing with that, obviously that ripe consumer age that's coming in, absolutely get this and care about this and demand it absolutely clearly. So, all the big brands are doing this because their customers are asking them primarily. Yeah. So, we need to remember who actually buys the majority of the products here and who's going to buy the majority of the products in the future and what they care about. And it may not be the same as you, but it absolutely is the movement.
Bob, can you do me a favor? Can you break out risk a little bit for me? I want to talk a little bit about risk that you're seeing. I want to jump into that. Tell me a little bit about the different types of risk. One of the ones that just becomes and I don't know if it's just my marketing background from spending 20 years inside a Publicis group, brand risk associated with whether or not you get the sustainability thing right just scares the hell out of me, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you got millions and billions of dollars being spent on brand. And if someone finds out that Coca-Cola, I'm sorry, a major soda or a soft drink.
We know who
company,
you mean now, Mike. So
sorry. Okay, let's take one of the water brands, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the water brand is pulling water out of a place that desperately needs water. I mean, all of a sudden, your brand goes to crap, right? So let's talk about risk a little bit. I'm really interested in your thoughts on the different types of risk and how it all breaks down.
Well, I'm gonna actually, the first thing I want to talk about is risk associated with what Ollie just talked about. What happens is you get the big brands that are out there, and they're going to do the living wage thing. I'm using living wage. And you have a supplier who might have a facility that they pay a living wage to because that one big customer asked for it. And we see this with forced labor. We see this with many other things. What happens is that doesn't mean that supplier has adopted a living wage across all of their employees.
Wow.
So the one who asked for accountability and demanded a certain metric, got it. Those who didn't ask, so those of you who are just kind of merrily going on your way, they're the ones who are going to get caught with the forced labor or the below living wage types of things, or apply it to any sustainability topic. And so I don't think it's important. It's great that these larger brands are taking a stand. I think it's important that every organization recognize that their supply chain could be at risk, even though a big brand has blazed a trail. So anyway, that was a risk. It just came to me that everyone go, oh great, I just need to follow the lead of them and use their suppliers, and that's not the case. So to the broader topic of risk, there are really two that I think are most compelling, and you touched on one, Mike. Reputational risk. There's research out there that has shown that when a brand gets caught with some negative news, something happened, forced labor or pollution or something like that within 24 hours, their market cap, so really their stock price, goes down by 13%. That fast. It's just a very direct. And so for some of these large hundreds of $billion-dollar companies, that's measured in the billions of dollars of impact, not thousands or millions. It's huge. So reputational impact is tangible for organizations of what could happen, not in their own operations, but in their supply chain. So that's that data supply chain. The other one is something that we don't often think about, which is continuity risk. And we're dealing a lot with that, with the COVID disruptions, et cetera. But think about the same thing. If you get caught using a supplier that's using forced labor, what options do you have other than to shut them down? Right?
Right.
I'm no longer going to buy. I have to go public and say I'm no longer doing business with that. Right? I'm disassociating myself from that supplier. Well, where are you going to get stuff from? Right? Yeah. So now all of a sudden your supply chain is at risk to be able to deliver the products that your customers want. So I think those are two major risks that have a very material impact to organizations.
Let me ask you this, and I'll ask you both this, because we've talked about just the enormity of this whole thing and the different types of risk and where to start and how organizations should be and where this sits inside of organizations today. It is Everest out there, right? Potentially, you're looking at just an absolutely, massive. Is there low-hanging fruit? Is there a place where people can start, get a quick victory, take that, run with it, get the publicity internally and externally on it, help that fund a larger sustainability program, et cetera, et cetera? And if so, in your two opinions, and I'll ask Oliver first, Oliver, where is the low-hanging fruit across all of the different types of sustainability, whether that's cyber risk, sustainability, socioeconomic impact, slave labor, like where's the low hanging fruit in your opinion? If you had to point somebody to start someplace today, where would it be?
Good question. There's a lot. And I think ultimately, one of the things that gets talked about in procurement sustainability is start and do something. So the size and the scale of it can be utterly bewildering. And then you go, oh, hold on, we haven't got the buy-in from the leadership. We haven't got the systems in place. We haven't got this or that. That shouldn't stop you starting something. And if that's working with some of your suppliers and just having a different conversation with them, calling them up and saying, we're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about something else. Tell me about this other risk. Tell me other issues. It could be about, I would always recommend getting into some peer groups with some of your peers. There's an industry group for everybody. There's a Sustainable Potato Alliance. There's a Sustainable Aluminium Consortium. There's 187 different sustainable procurement groups right now in the world in operation. And part of my mission is to try and sort all that out, frankly. That's basically what I do. So there's something for everyone. So go and talk to your peers, be it Sustainable Procurement Pledge and the Procurement Foundry should have a sustainability Slack channel and everything else.
We do. And it has 400 people in it.
Well, there we go.
Shameless plug. We do have a room with 400 people in it.
So get a project going, give it a go, work it out, get a good business case together, use it as evidence, as you say, to do more. That's one obvious thing. Go and talk to your peers, find out where your peers are actually there. Go and learn from them would be another thing. You've got to know where you are. So good data is absolutely critical. But people bang on about good data. The reason why you want good data is to get good insights so you can take good action. Right. So yes, you need good data, but you're getting data not for data's sake. You're getting data to make good decisions. So you've got to get good data. You can't run a business off Excel spreadsheets. Look, every solution provider says this all the time, but it's madness to suggest that you do otherwise. So you need good systems, particularly if you're going to be working with shared suppliers. So you need to get that sort of house in order as well. But behavior change is key. You need to start having a conversation. There'll be plenty of people in your business that ultimately do care about this, whether it's the sustainability guy or girl in the corner, or it's the one that's suddenly the most powerful person in the company because the CEO's made a claim about they're going to do something. So there is plenty of people in the business that you can find and engage and actually build something with. So there's a few things there.
So Matt says momentum is key to success, getting started and then keep moving.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally. Get on.
Absolutely no question about that. Thanks, Matt. Bob, just for you really quickly, I want to jump in because we've only got about 7 minutes left. Let's talk about best practices and where people are succeeding at this. Are there, and I want to come back to that topic that Jared brought up on LinkedIn Live. Thank you, Jared, for that, around gamification of your vendor pool. Is there a way to reward vendor population? Is that a best practice? Are people starting to deploy that as a strategy? Are you seeing that amongst your clientele? And what are some of the best practices around KPIs? I'll start with Bob because I want to hear what a success looks like. Just keep in mind we've got about 6 minutes left. I'd love to hear from Bob and then from Oliver on that.
Okay. Just quickly, there are two key first steps that we see from most organizations. So the first thing is get a baseline, right? Go ask, go see where you're at. Go ask your suppliers some basic questions, so that kind of where you stand right now. And then the second thing is prioritize, because as Ollie pointed out, you can't boil the ocean right from the beginning. And that prioritization can either be, what is it that's a priority for your organization? Are you making your marketing team making a statement you need to support? Is it geographical? You might want to be concerned about a geography of suppliers. That'll be up to you in terms of how to prioritize, and then start drilling down. That's where then it starts to get a little bit harder, that you need to then focus on what data do we need and how do we drive change in those priority areas, and then you can broaden that going forward. To the question in terms of I threw out the term gamification in my comment in there. We found we have a piece of functionality that allows buyers to share where a given supplier compares to their peers, so they can see in an anonymous way kind of where they're at on that particular metric.
Some benchmarking, right?
I mean, they can go to the guy who's looking at that, who reported it, can go to his boss and say, hey, we need to get our act together here because we're at the bottom and we need to do better than that. So I think, that's one way to motivate behavior change. I'll just say one last thing. Procurement, guys, I mean, you have the ultimate stick, which is if you don't meet this standard that we put out there, we're not going to buy from you anymore. And ultimately, I think that's why consumers are holding companies accountable, brands accountable, is because they have the ultimate motivator. Change or find, we're going to find someone to replace you.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, listen, I'm all for carrying a stick. One of the ways I'm interested in it is approaching them from a, hey, listen, we're adopting this next year as our standard. How do we prepare you to continue to be a supplier to ours so that we can sustain your business model long-term as well and partner with you to get you to where we need to be, right?
Yeah. I'm all about helping everybody improve, right? We want to make everyone better. So please don't take it as a suggestion.
I'm much more around wrapping my arm around somebody and walking with them.
Totally agree.
I have been told that I am a dull, blunt instrument at times, so I will accept that. But Oliver, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean,
KPIs, best practices.
I would highlight that actually SupplyShift, as far as I am aware, obviously a key part of the Walmart program on sustainability, and they are one of the best examples of the best carrot in the business, which is their work with HSBC to reward suppliers who have good sustainability scores to actually get better lending rates on loans to actually make improvements on sustainability. And those scores, if I remember rightly, Bob, are done through, I think, your platform. So, ultimately, I think there's an example of an organization rewarding and supporting, not just rewarding, supporting change, positive change to happen in their supply chain. But I think just to reflect on probably the most important point that I would share, and probably my last reflection, and you probably want to wrap up on that, is the whole dynamics of supplier engagement, collaboration are changing. The days of audit and compliance and sending just questionnaires out and that's it are going, if not gone. So you need to collaborate with your supply chain. You need to drive innovation, new products, new services. You need to drive supply improvement. One of the big trends that came out of the work that ProcureTech are doing on this list that I was judging was the saying that the supplier experience is absolutely critical. For too long, buyers have just been saying, we'll just tell our suppliers to do stuff. We'll just give them questionnaires and they'll give us data. If suppliers don't have a good experience and they don't get value from the interaction and the data and the dashboards like the guys at SupplyShift do, then they won't change. They literally will not change. They really won't. Or they'll find it very difficult too, because they're facing the same challenges and they don't have sustainability teams and so on. So the future is really helping your supply chain to improve at scale, using data, using insight, using and enabling that supply chain to get better. It's not the days of just assuming that asking questions or telling your supply chain to change and suddenly they magically change. Those days are going, if not gone. And I think that's a really important message to say, that procurement professionals are about transforming their supply chain, not just understanding it a little bit better. That's not enough.
Yeah. Bob, amazingly, we're out of time. I think we could talk for 3 hours on this. I'd love to do another session on this with sustainability. I know I'm going to be reaching out to Oliver on how the Sustainability Procurement Pledge and Procurement Founder can work together in the future. Bob, one last thought, one last takeaway for the audience today. Anything, if there's one nugget they need to take away? I love what Oliver just said around, it's no longer an audit and compliance thing. This really is a partnership and move forward thing. I love that. Bob, any thoughts on your one takeaway for everybody?
Define the journey and get started, get going, move to whatever that next step is. And as Ollie said, leverage those who've gone before you on that journey, because there's a lot of good work being done out there with industry groups.
Couldn't agree more.
It's amazing how many of these I do where I hear that, Bob, which is, hey man, just throw the lines and start sailing. You'll figure out how to sail once you get on the water, right?
Yeah.
You got to tack off of it. So
one final thing, Mike, just very quickly. I was shared a kind of message by Thomas Uderson, who's the chair of the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. He said, as a definition of a procurement professional is someone who does meticulous guesswork based on ambiguous data and achieves unrealistic expectations under impossible deadlines. That's the definition of a procurement professional. And my reflection on that sounds like a sustainability professional as well. So basically, they're both in the same boat. trying to do ridiculous things with very little data and so on. So I think that was an interesting reflection that I had today anyway.
So is Tina still with us? Tina, are you in the background? And Tina, do
This
you
is
have?
about the cup, right? This is about the mug. You want me to show
So
it? I knew it.
Oliver, you nailed it, buddy. I'm going to bring Tina back on stage. Tina, can you come on stage for just 1 second?
Here I come.
All right, Tina's going to come on stage. Oliver, here's what I'm going to do. Can you show that mug? Show the front of it, right? So I got Procurement Foundry mugs, right? I got Procurement Foundry mugs with the procurement specialist definition in the back. We added sea, wizard, and magician underneath that, right?
Oh, well, that's what I saw earlier. Your fame goes before you, Mike.
So
I
here's what I'm
genuinely
going to do.
didn't set that up. I promise you, I did not set that up. I had no idea that was your thing. I bet you're happy with that.
I didn't know you were going to set that up, and I'm thrilled that you're going to set that up. And Bob, I'm going to do one better for you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look into the audience from today, both on LinkedIn and inside of the Zoom room. I'm going to pick 2 people to get 2 of those Procurement Foundry mugs, thanks to SupplyShift and thanks to this.
Oh, I'd love
Oliver, perfect. And we'll ship one to Oliver as well, so that he can drink out of it in the future. All right.
I can't believe I've done that.
Perfect way to end.
That's good.
Thank you for the setup. Thank you for everything, Bob. Really appreciate you as a sponsor. Amazing conversation. This is definitely one you're going to go back and listen to again. 2 huge nuggets at the end of this today around how this is no longer an audit and a compliance effort. This is a partnership and long-time journey partnership. And throw the lines and start sailing. You got to get moving on this thing. Just define the journey and go. I love that, Bob. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And one of the funnest ones I've done in a while. So thank you. And Oliver and Bob, your mugs are on the way. All right.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Take
Ollie.
care, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers.
Good to meet you, Bob. Cheers, bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.